Taliban gets 239 million US dollar in US Afghan aid after State Department fails to vet awardees. Let's go ahead and dive into this article by the Judicial Watch. Up at the top here, we have our title. There we go, by Judicial Watch. Less than a year ago, after Judicial Watch reported, I'm just going to say JW, reported that the Taliban has established fake nonprofits to steal millions of dollars in U.S. aid to Afghan. A new investigation, reveals that the terrorist group has also received hundreds of millions in development assistance from no other than Uncle Sam, because the State Department fails to properly vet award recipients. At least 239 million have likely filled the coffers of the extremists running the Islamic Republic since the 2021 U.S. military withdrawal. Who would have thought that? According to a report published this month by the Special Inspector General for Afghan Reconstruction, or SIGAR, the money was dispersed by State Department division known as Democracy, Human Rights, and Labor, or DRL. I'm sure it's a beautiful place to work at. And International Narcotics and Law Enforcement Affairs to implement development projects intended to help achieve American foreign policy and national security goals in Afghan. Investigations found the State Department failed to comply with its own counterterrorism partner vetting requirements in Afghan before awarding at least 29 grants to various local entities. Good job, State Department. Fantastic. The agency has a system to identify whether prospective awardees have a record of ethical business practices and is supposed to take a risk assessment to determine if programming funds may benefit terrorists or terrorist affiliates before distributing American taxpayer dollars. In more than 24 cases examined, so over 24, for those of you who can't math like myself, the agency did not bother and failed to keep proper records. Because DRL and INL could not demonstrate their compliance with states' partner vetting requirements, there's an increased risk that terrorists and terrorist affiliate individuals and entities may have illegally benefited from state spending in Afghanistan, the SIGAR report says. As state continues to spend U.S. taxpayer funds on programs intended to benefit the Afghan people, it is critical that state as a Department of State, knows who is actually benefiting from this assistance in order to prevent the aid from being diverted to the Taliban or other sanctioned parties, and to enable policymakers and other oversight authorities to better scrutinize the risk posed by states' spending. You know, the same thing can be said for Ukraine, but that's not what this video is about. This is about Taliban, and that's a whole other can of worms. The Watchdog found issues with 29 awards distributed by DRL and INL. For instance, DRL failed to properly screen the recipients of 7 awards totaling about $12 million, investigators found. How do you just give $12 million away and not follow your own process? Give me $12 million bucks. INL did not provide any supporting documentation for 19 of its 22 awards, totaling about $295 million. So there's no way to determine if they complied with the vetting requirements. That's probably because they don't have the paperwork. Okay, they don't have documentation, probably. The State Department acknowledged that not all its bureaus have complied with document retention requirements, which makes it conveniently impossible to fully assess the magnitude of its transgressions. Where you see one, you'll see another, okay? The most dangerous IED is the one you don't see, and I think that same concept applies here. The explanation offered for INL not retaining records is employee turnover and the dissolution of the Afghan-Pakistan office, according to a report SIGAR points out. SIGAR points out that given the Taliban's takeover of Afghan in 2021, it's critical that U.S. government activities adhere to the laws regulations, and policies intended to prevent certain transactions with terrorists. I would say it's always important to adhere to the laws, regulations, and policies, especially when we're talking about American taxpayer dollars. But who am I? Just some dude on YouTube that makes videos, right? Besides establishing fraudulent non-governmental organizations or NGOs to loot big chunks of the $3 billion in humanitarian aid that the U.S. has given Afghan since the Biden administration's abrupt military withdrawal, the Taliban has ranked in millions more by charging taxes, permit fees, and import duties. That is absolutely hilarious that the Taliban become a government and the first thing they do is tax the people. Imagine that. That money has flowed through the U.S. Agency for International Development, USAID, a famously corrupt State Department arm that got $63.1 billion for foreign assistance and diplomatic engagement this year, and the U.S. Agency for Global Media, USAGM, the government's international broadcasting services that aims to inform, engage, and connect people around the world in support of freedom and democracy. Little Helldiver-ish there, right? Freedom and democracy. The United Nations has also received $1.6 billion in U.S. funding for Afghan, and a large percentage of that money most likely went to the Taliban as well, according to a federal audit. There's a link there. I'll put this link below in the pinned comment, because the U.S. government does not require the leftist world body to report on taxes, fees, or duties incurred on American funds for activists in Afghanistan. So all in all, things are going great